that in the word read and proclaimed, we might know your truth. Amen.
The scripture lesson today comes from the Gospel according to Luke, the 12th chapter, beginning with the 13th verse. Jesus has been traveling and he has been teaching, and at this point we get one of his more famous parables. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But Jesus said to him, "Friend, who set me to be judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." And then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." And then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." And Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouses nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And which of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your span of life? If then you are not able to do a small thing as that, why do you worry about the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not keep seeking what you are to eat and what you are to drink. Do not keep worrying. For it is the nations of the world that seek all these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." The word of the Lord. Well, here we were in summer school, and the teacher posed the following problem to her arithmetic class of sixth graders. And she said to the class, "A wealthy man dies and he leaves $10 million. 1/5 goes to his wife, 1/5 goes to his son, 1/6 goes to his butler, and the rest goes to charity. Now, what does each one get?" Well, there was silence in the classroom, but finally Joey raised his hand and the teacher called on Joey, and with complete sincerity, Joey answered, "A lawyer." Well, indeed, here we live in New Jersey with more than our share of lofty salaries, multi-million-dollar bonuses, executives who live like 18th century royalty. But the quest for wealth actually has little to do with living well. Every time an ordinary person, every time you or me takes a walk in the park, buys a coffee at the coffee shop, stops and talks with friends, we prove again that living well depends much more on health and friendship and love. The bank balance is not nearly as important. The quest for wealth is exactly that, a quest for wealth, a hunger for cash, as if a 7-figure salary proved that you are a worthwhile person, if it proved your skill, your value, your importance. No actual necessity drives us to those amounts. It's just desire for more. And that's what Jesus is talking about when he talks about his parable of the rich man who built his bigger barns. At some point, the abundant harvest goes well past what one needs, and it becomes an obsession all by itself. A deadly obsession, Jesus says, an obsession that deprives life of its meaning and its joy. So, a man came up to Jesus and said, "Make my brother divide the inheritance with me." The request is crass, boorish, but probably not uncommon. Jesus was known as a traveling rabbi, and rabbis were known to settle disputes because the laws of the religion and the laws of the culture were so intertwined. But Jesus is annoyed, and he says, "Come on, who made me the divider over you?" And instead of adjudicating the case, he tells the story, and he says, "Beware of covetousness, for a person's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." When he said that, you could hear the gasp in the crowd. For when Jesus said that simple phrase, he was challenging a fundamental assumption that his listeners had. In that society, the belief was that a person's life was measured by possessions. Possessions were a sign of God's favor. The reasoning went, if you are right with God, then God will be good to you. You will be rich, you will prosper. It says so right in the book of Deuteronomy. God says, if you obey my law and live righteously, I will give you this land, and you will prosper. If you disobey, you will be punished. Well, that's a literal reading of Deuteronomy, but the prophets had already attacked that and challenged that and reinterpreted that over and over again. They said, no. The righteousness and the wealth are not about you as an individual. It's about us as a community. If we live righteously, if we live with social justice and mercy and compassion, then the society will be rich. The society will be righteous. The result will be a moral society. It's not really about personal wealth. The assumption that wealth is the reward was wrong, but it was popular and it was persistent. So Jesus challenges it again and again. He challenges it here. He challenges it in the Beatitudes. You remember, blessed are the poor. A person's life is not the same as a person's possessions. So Jesus said, there was a rich man who had enough possessions to guarantee his comfort. He said, eat, drink, and be merry. I will build more barns. And God says, no, tonight your life will be required of you. And once you are dead, who do those barns belong to? Jesus told parables to shake people up. He said these things to shock people, to get them thinking about the way they were living. And Luke puts it in his gospel so we also can be shaken up a little bit so we can reflect on how we live. What is our life about? What are our priorities? Jesus wants us to ask that very tough question, what have I given up in order to gain this wealth? What values have I sort of slipped by in order to value these possessions? What immorality have I closed my eyes to so that I could have this wealth? What did I not give my family in terms of love and leadership and protection in order that I might give them material goods? Think about that. What really constitutes the good life? What am I seeking? What am I postponing until I have enough? Then I will take care of those matters. That's for tomorrow. But today I'm going to secure my future. Someday I'm going to spend more time with my kids. Someday I'm going to sit down and say to my loved ones what I have always wanted to say to them. Someday I'm going to sit down and really listen to what my loved ones want to say to me. Someday, when I have enough time, someday I'll get to it. Someday, someday. You fool, says Jesus. Time does not belong to you. There's a story of a young man who's 29 years old. And this young man was married and had 3 children, and he was working as an attorney in Illinois. And one day, he woke up with a headache. And as the day went on, that headache got worse and worse. It became very, very painful. And then he had trouble seeing. His vision wasn't working correctly. And then he had trouble walking. He couldn't keep his balance properly. So off to the doctor he goes, and the doctor says, you have a brain tumor, and you will need surgery. And if you survive that surgery, there will be a critical recovery time of about a year. Well, thanks be to God, the young man made it through the surgery, and he made it through the first year, and then he was interviewed. And the reporter said, have you learned anything from all of this? And the young man answered, oh yes, I learned. Your life is on loan. And that's the message of the parable. The point of the parable, the one that everybody seems to get, is that we can't take our possessions with us. But the other thing is your life is on loan. You can build all the barns you want, but tonight your soul might be required of you. You know that. You're all good Presbyterians, I'm sure of that. You're good Christians. You know your life belongs to God. That's the Christian understanding. We are sojourners, pilgrims, travelers. We're here for a short time, maybe 40, 50, 60, if we're really lucky, 90 or 100 years. You're supposed to use that time as a steward of what God has given to you. Christians have always believed that. We are travelers passing through to another place, and we are to do our work here. John Bunyan made that idea part of the consciousness of the Western world in his book, Pilgrim's Progress. You remember that up until the 20th century, most American homes would have at least 3 books in them. One book was the Bible, and one book was McGuffey's Reader, and one book was Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. Everybody read it. Everybody had a shared consciousness of who we are as human beings and what we are supposed to do. I don't think anyone reads it anymore. I don't think we see ourselves as pilgrims anymore. We don't understand that we still are sojourners. We still are travelers. I think we see ourselves as settlers now, that we've put down roots, we've built our barns. We know that we are independent, autonomous, free, moral agents. From childhood now, we are told, your life is your own. You are free to make up your mind about what is right and what is wrong. Instead of uniting us in one culture, as Pilgrim's Progress did, there are now a spate of autobiographies and memoirs, thousands of stories, not told by old wise women and old wise men, but told by people in their 20s and their 30s, autobiographies of self-indulgence, congratulations, all this common assumption of our time. This is my life. I can do what I want. That's the wrong assumption, according to Jesus Christ. The Bible continues to affront us. It says, you affect other people. You have responsibility to other people. You are responsible to those closest to you, your loved ones, your family. You are responsible to your friends and to your neighbors, and you are responsible to the whole society and to the next generation. Every one of those groups is affected by what you do. This is not your life. This is a life to you on loan from God. You bear God's image. That's the meaning of your baptism. You belong to Christ. My life is on loan. That helped the young man put his priorities in order. And he says, through all the hardship of the surgery and the recovery, it strengthened his family. Now he and his wife are raising their children to live each day as a child of God, to rejoice in each day. He says, my message to people would be, accept this day as a gift, because I lived for 28 years, and then one day I woke up with a headache. Boom, just like that. Jesus says, stop being so foolish. What's really important is what God has given you. You may want a whole lot more, but do not think you need these things. Do not sacrifice the real wealth in order to get the transitory stuff. Wealth is dangerous to us because it can shield us from the truth. If we were really to live day by day, if we lived hand to mouth, we would be aware how fragile life is. But if we store up big barns, we begin to be seduced into thinking that life is our own and we can do with it as we please. Jesus does not condemn wealth. He simply says, don't trust it. Don't believe in it. Don't worship it. Trust God. Put your faith in God. Be rich toward God. The chapter from Luke begins with this parable of the rich fool. If you want a quiet afternoon and you keep reading that chapter from Luke's gospel, you will see that the chapter ends with the parable of the wise steward. So first we learn your life is on loan, and then we learn that what God gives us is for us to do good things with. We are given a limited time to do it. We make lots of jokes about getting through those pearly gates, but I suspect when we arrive at that famous destination, God is going to ask us only two questions. And first, God is going to ask, what did you do with what I gave you? And then God will ask, who did you do it for? Amen.